Hey guys, it's time for Max 5-Minute Japanese. I thought that I would try to spend a little bit of time explaining my journey with Japanese, how I got to get to be as proficient as I am. Not saying that I'm awesome, but I'm alright. I thought I would start a little bit with the history of the Japanese language. It's kind of boring, but it's also kind of interesting if you're into linguistics. So, Japanese is not a language that is associated with any of the other more widely spoken languages in the world. There are language trees for different families of languages. There's the Romance languages, this, that, and the other. But Japanese doesn't actually fit into any of those trees, even with other Asian languages like Chinese and Korean, or perhaps they just don't fit in that language tree. More of the languages that more closely resemble Japanese are more Southeast Asian languages, but not widely spoken languages. I'm talking about languages that are spoken on remote islands and places like that. Although there are some places where there are some Turkish words that are the same as Japanese words. So maybe there's kind of a relationship there, but it's really kind of a mystery where the spoken language of Japanese comes from. It's very interesting because most of the other languages in the world you can clearly point to an area or a region or a root for where it comes from, and Japanese is kind of people who know, and I'm not one of them, but they're still kind of on the fence about where Japanese actually comes from. So that's kind of interesting. But that's the oral history of Japanese. As far as the written part of Japanese, many years ago, over thousands of years ago, Japan was occupied by the Chinese. And one of the things that the Chinese brought to Japan was Buddhism and also kanji, which is the Chinese written style, using characters for words, that kind of thing. Before that, there was really no written Japanese language. It was pretty much all an oral language. And what they began to do was they borrowed the kanji that the Chinese used for their names and places, and then they just began using it for writing. But an interesting thing that happened was they began to develop their own writing system for their language, and they mixed them together. And actually, hiragana is that written style. So they began to mix that with the kanji. And one of the more difficult things about Japanese is that the kanjis do have more than one pronunciation. So one will be the Chinese pronunciation or something close to it, and then one is an all-new Japanese pronunciation. It's one of the things that makes learning how to read Japanese a challenge. And of course there are over 2,000 Japanese kanji, which makes it a challenge to write Japanese kanji. There's also Katakana, which was developed after hiragana, I believe. And for most people who live in Japan now know, Katakana is used for a lot of foreign words. So like if you see a word like communication or something like that, like those words are always written in katakana because that way it kind of identifies it as a foreign borrowed word. So the spoken language of Japanese itself is very interesting. It's because there is a consonant and a vowel sound. They're paired together. And it's very easy because there is no inflection. There's no long and short vowel sounds. So for example, in English, our vowels are A, E, I, O, U. But in Japanese it is a, I, U, e, o. And those vowel sounds never change. Like in English where it could be a or a or something like that. In Japanese it doesn't change. So when you pair that with consonant sounds, for example, like ka is ka. Ka is always ka. The pronunciation never changes. So once you learn that, it kind of makes speaking Japanese not so terrible. Although there are some inflections of words that are very difficult for me to pronounce. There is one, for example, in English we'd say like ra. In Japanese or in katakana you'd write, like this. But the actual pronunciation of the sound is a mix between R and L. So it's very difficult for me to get that perfectly right. And it's one of the reasons why Japanese people have a hard time pronouncing R and L separately, because in their language the sounds are kind of mixed together. And also for people who don't study Japanese, they know there aren't any diphthongs in Japanese. Well, there's a few, but not many. So, for example, TH is not a pronunciation that's in Japanese, so it's very hard for a lot of Japanese people to pronounce like the Thursday 3. It's something that a lot of people have a hard time with, but not everyone. But it's one of those, if it's not in your language, it's kind of hard to do. Well, I feel like I've blathered on about the Japanese language long enough. Next time I'll go into actually how I studied Japanese and what some of my tips were in the early going. So I hope you enjoyed this. I hope you learned something. If you have any comments or tips, please feel free to drop them in the comment box. This wasn't quite 5 minutes, but that's okay. I mean, it's just a title, so don't take it too seriously. Alright guys, keep an eye out for my next video. See ya.